The lights were too bright. Not in the way that made you squint, but in the way that made you question if the people behind them were trying to expose more than just your face. Governor JB Pritzker adjusted his cuffs. He smiled. Not too wide. Not too restrained. The kind of smile you perfect after years of public service, press briefings, and dodging loaded questions. He stepped onto the stage of the Late Show like it was his front porch. Confident. Comfortable. Or at least pretending to be. The applause hit like a wave, manufactured yet earnest, a strange mix of curiosity and allegiance echoing through the studio. JB nodded to the band, always nod to the band, and approached the desk with practiced ease. He shook the host's hand like they'd known each other for years, even though they'd only met once backstage for 5 minutes over stale coffee and tight schedules. "You're looking sharp, Governor," the host said with that slick grin that seemed stitched into his cheeks. "Good to see you." "Good to be here," Pritzker replied, glancing at the crowd. "Love the band." "Fantastic band," the host repeated, already turning toward the camera. "So, Governor, serendipity. That's what this is tonight. Because while you're officially just the governor of Illinois, right now you're also running a safe house for Democrats on the run." The crowd chuckled, not all of them. Some tensed, others leaned forward. Pritzker gave a small, knowing shrug. "Well, I wouldn't call it a safe house." The host arched an eyebrow. "You're harboring fugitives, Governor. Texas Democrats fled their state after Republicans tried to, let's not sugarcoat it, hijack their congressional maps. This is a pure power grab." There it was. The real topic. No warm-up. No softball. Straight into the fire. "They came to Illinois," the host continued. "Why?" The smile faded from Pritzker's face just slightly. The muscles in his jaw tightened, nearly invisible to the casual viewer but unmistakable to those watching closely. "Because Donald Trump is trying to steal 5 seats from the American people," he said. "Not just Texans. All of us. What they're doing down there isn't politics. It's sabotage. It's a violation of the Voting Rights Act and the Constitution." So, when the Texas House Democrats realized they couldn't stop the vote in their own chamber, they did the only thing they could do. They left. A pause. That pause meant to let the gravity settle. The audience was quiet now. Listening. And they chose Illinois because we're not just another blue state. We're a line in the sand. The host leaned forward. "You're proud of them." "Damn right I am." The moment flickered, nearly turned righteous. Until the host's next line cut through it. "I assume you've got them stashed around Chicago somewhere," he asked with a smirk. "Undisclosed locations, a little Cheney hide and seek?" The governor chuckled, played along. "Exactly. Same bunker, maybe." A few laughs from the crowd. But the host wasn't done. "Let me ask you this," he said. "California already announced a counterattack. If Texas goes through with their plan, California redraws their own maps, wipes out half a dozen GOP seats. Tit for tat. Dead man switch style. Will Illinois do the same?" Pritzker didn't blink. "Everything's on the table." The words hung in the air like a warning. "They tossed the rulebook," he continued. "If we let that slide, we're not defending democracy. We're surrendering it." The host glanced toward the screen behind them, a massive graphic showing the most twisted congressional districts in Illinois. They looked like spilled spaghetti noodles. One curled like a scorpion's tail. Another zigzagged like a panic attack. "This one here," the host pointed. "Is that a Rorschach test or a district?" Pritzker grinned. "We let kindergartners draw it. Really opens up creativity. The independent commission, right?" "Exactly," he said. "We do it by the book." "But what Texas is doing," the host said, voice suddenly lowering, "isn't after the census. It's mid-decade. Out of schedule. Out of line. That's what makes it dangerous," Pritzker said. "That's what makes it different." The host didn't interrupt. "Let the governor run. They're not just redrawing maps. They're erasing black and brown voters. Entire districts designed to protect minority representation under the Voting Rights Act, gone. Trump himself called them, asked for 5 seats. That's not policy. That's theft." Gasps from a few audience members. Others looked down at their phones, scrolling silently. Watching headlines bloom in real time. "And now Senator Cornyn is calling on the FBI to track them down," the host said, a flicker of amusement in his voice, though his eyes had narrowed. "These Texas Democrats, they're wanted men and women now." "Wanted for what?" Pritzker snapped. "They haven't broken a single federal law." A new edge in his voice now. No longer the soft-spoken statesman. Now he sounded like the man behind closed doors, pounding a desk, holding back the tide. "In Illinois, we don't honor partisan civil warrants from another state's speaker. As long as they're here, they're safe." A murmur passed through the studio. Somewhere backstage, a producer whispered something into a headset. There was a tension now. Something had shifted. The air felt heavier. Even the band was silent. The host adjusted his tie, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said, "this is going to be one hell of a week." "You have no idea," Pritzker muttered. What wasn't said on air was what everyone was really thinking. Where were they hiding? What came next? And how long could this standoff last? Because behind the laughter and applause, something was boiling. Not just in Texas or Illinois, but across every state line in America. A quiet war was underway, disguised as legislation and district lines, cloaked in legality but drenched in intent. And somewhere, inside a brownstone in the West Loop, or maybe a high-rise hotel under fake names, sat the fugitives. Watching the show. Knowing the clock was ticking. The host smiled again, just a little too wide. "We'll be right back with more from Governor JB Pritzker. Everybody, stick around." The cameras cut. The applause cue lit up. And the governor exhaled. He had said the right things. The necessary things. But he knew this wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. Not yet. And if you're the kind of viewer who believes that drama only lives in Hollywood or on some celebrity's tabloid headline, think again. Because this time, the war wasn't between co-stars or agents. It was between governors and ghosts of democracy. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. If you're not already subscribed, now's the time. Because what happens next? It's only going to get more explosive. Chicago never sleeps, but on that night, it seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere north of the Loop, past the polished towers and glowing riverfront, 3 black SUVs moved without sirens, headlights off, hugging the curb like shadows. Inside, 2 state troopers rode silent, their hands not on guns, but on folders. Intel. Routes. Worst-case scenarios. Because it wasn't just a matter of hospitality anymore. It was protection. Governor JB Pritzker watched them from a high window in the governor's mansion annex, a building most people didn't even know existed. It wasn't listed. It wasn't photographed. And tonight, it wasn't empty. Downstairs, 17 members of the Texas House Democratic Caucus were living off bad coffee and adrenaline. Phones off. Windows closed. Curtains drawn. They moved like ghosts through a borrowed sanctuary, every sound echoing too loudly. And upstairs, the weight of their safety sat squarely on the governor's shoulders. "This is not what I signed up for," he muttered. "You kind of did," said Denise, his chief of staff. "Remember that whole defender of democracy thing?" He gave her a tired smile. "I thought that meant speeches. Ribbon cuttings. A strongly worded tweet every now and then." Denise didn't laugh. She was already scanning a new report. A tip about a Texas lawmaker's spouse being approached at O'Hare. Another about a Republican donor offering a reward for the location of the fugitives. "They're not fugitives," Pritzker snapped, reading over her shoulder. She nodded. "I know that. But the press isn't calling them heroes anymore. Headlines are shifting. Runaways, escapists, partisan stunt. Even CNN is using the word hiding." Pritzker turned back to the window. "They're not hiding," he said. "They're holding the line. But lines get blurry. Fast. Especially when the other side is willing to burn the rulebook." Backstage at the Late Show had been all cameras and applause. But this? This was the aftermath. The quiet part no one sees. The cost. Because while Pritzker played the composed leader on national TV, he knew things the audience didn't. Knew that hours before the taping, there had been a meeting. A quiet, unofficial one. With a man who didn't give his full name, but carried a Senate security badge clipped upside down on purpose. He'd offered a solution. Not an arrest. Not an extradition. Just removal. Quiet. Political. No fingerprints. "They can go voluntarily," the man had said, voice low. "Or we can create a reason to make them. A scandal. A leak. One of them already has a pending ethics complaint. It wouldn't take much." Pritzker had stared at him for a long, long moment. Then he'd stood up and said 6 words that made the man blink. "Get the hell out of Illinois." Now, hours later, that same threat hovered in the air like smoke. Invisible, but choking everyone who breathed it in. Meanwhile, across town, someone else was preparing a different kind of show. The host of The Late Show, whose name we'll withhold for reasons that will soon become clear, sat alone in his dressing room, staring at his phone. The screen was filled with angry texts. Not from the network. Not from censors. From people. Powerful people. "You were too soft on him. You let him spin the narrative. You're a comedian, not a crusader." And one message, from a number with no name, just 3 letters. "Fix it." The host's reflection stared back at him in the mirror. He didn't recognize the man looking back. Too much makeup. Too many compromises. He'd thought the governor's visit would be ratings gold, and it was. But not the way he wanted. Not the controlled burn. This was a wildfire now. And the host, like so many others in this story, was realizing he wasn't the arsonist. He was just fuel. By morning, the headlines had changed again. Governor Pritzker accused of shielding lawmakers from federal investigation. Texas Dems living in luxury while legislature suffers. FBI now exploring legal avenues for retrieval. Denise threw the newspaper down onto the briefing table. They're spinning it. Hard. Pritzker rubbed his temples. Of course they are. It's the only move they have left. Create noise. Sow confusion. Distract. What do we do? He looked up. We go louder. An hour later, Pritzker stood on the steps of the Illinois Capitol, flanked by 2 civil rights attorneys, 1 former judge, and exactly 0 political consultants. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. And live streams buzzed to life on every network. To anyone suggesting we've broken the law, he said, voice steady, I ask you this, since when is it illegal to protect the Constitution? The crowd roared. To anyone suggesting these lawmakers are criminals, I ask you, what law did they break? Who did they harm? Or is the real crime that they dared to fight back? His voice grew louder. Let me be clear, Illinois will not bow to political pressure. We will not hand over public servants to partisan vengeance. We will not be bullied by governors who think they can redraw democracy. And just like that, he stepped back from the podium. No questions. No sound bites. A drop-the-mic moment in broad daylight. But even as the crowd erupted, even as Twitter lit up with hashtags and pundits scrambled to reframe their narratives, trouble was already moving in the dark. That night, a quiet knock came to room 1422 of the Renaissance Hotel. Inside, Representative Daniel Tovar, one of the youngest of the Texas caucus, sat in a hoodie with the blinds drawn. He'd been quiet most of the trip. A first-term idealist who still believed in good-faith debates. He opened the door a crack. The man standing there was familiar. Not a lawmaker. Not a journalist. A strategist. From the other side. How did you find me? Tovar whispered. The man smiled. Same way we always do. You tweeted last week about that steakhouse down the block. Rookie move. Tovar opened the door fully now. You're not supposed to be here. Neither are you. What do you want? The man didn't answer. He just handed over a folder. Slim. Black. What's this? Tovar asked. Insurance. Tovar opened it. His eyes widened. Photos. Emails. A thread of something he thought he'd buried before his first campaign even launched. You release this. I won't, the man said. If you make the right call. What call? Go back to Texas. Flip the vote. Let them win this round. You'll be rewarded. Quietly. No one will ever know. Tovar looked at the folder again. His hands trembled. Think about it, the man said, turning to leave. One bad vote, or your entire career. And just like that, the crack widened in the dam. Meanwhile, Denise paced outside the governor's office, phone pressed tight to her ear. We've got a problem, she whispered. How bad? Bad enough, she said. They're inside the walls now. They're not trying to arrest anyone. They're trying to turn them. One by one. Inside, Governor Pritzker stood alone, staring at a wall of maps. District lines. Red. Blue. Purple. Wounds carved into geography. He didn't know it yet. But within 24 hours, one of the Texas Democrats would be gone. Back in Austin. And the vote would be back on the table. But we'll get to that. First, there's one more thing you should know. There was a leak. Not just any leak. A hotel room number. A name. A time. And somewhere, across the country, a plane was being fueled. Flight path unlisted. Manifest scrubbed. Its destination? Chicago. Its passenger? A man with no title, but more power than anyone should ever have. And if you're still watching this unfold, good. Because the storm hasn't hit yet. He left in the middle of the night. No note. No warning. Just a silent elevator ride at 2:43 a.m. and a backdoor exit through the hotel laundry dock. Representative Daniel Tovar was gone. By sunrise, the news had already broken. Texas Democrat returns to Austin, House reconvenes for emergency vote. It hit the governor's office like a gut punch. Denise read the headline 3 times before knocking. Pritzker didn't look up from his desk. He'd already seen it. How? He asked. She didn't answer. Because they both knew the answer didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this: the shield was broken. One had fallen. And now the others were exposed. Within hours, the others began to fray. Quiet whispers turned to open arguments. Trust cracked. Accusations flew. Some said Tovar had been blackmailed. Others said bribed. A few wondered if he'd always been the mole. The fugitives, once unified by a cause, were now hostages of suspicion. And in the middle of it all stood JB Pritzker, staring at a house divided. "This is the play," Denise said. "This is what they wanted. Not arrests. Not headlines. Just chaos. They've been planning it from the start," he murmured. "Turn one, the rest will eat each other." Across town, the Late Show host sat down for a follow-up segment. This time, no live audience. Just a camera. A cold studio. And a script that had been rewritten 3 times in one afternoon. "We've been following the ongoing saga of the Texas Democrats in Illinois," he began. "And now, the cracks are beginning to show." Behind him, footage played, news anchors speculating, pundits shouting, Pritzker's face frozen mid-sentence from his previous appearance. But the tone was different now. Less admiration. More blood in the water. "They're calling this Pritzker's Waterloo," one analyst said. "An overreach," another added. "A stunt gone wrong." And then, the Real bomb dropped. A leaked recording. Grainy. Muffled. But unmistakable. It was Pritzker's voice. "Fight fire with fire. Whatever it takes to preserve democracy." Spun out of context, those words were twisted into something darker. A declaration of political warfare. Proof, some claimed, that the governor had crossed the line. By sunset, national networks were using the phrase, Pritzker Doctrine. They made it sound sinister. Like a coup. Denise slammed her laptop shut. "They've weaponized your own words." He didn't flinch. "Then I'll give them new ones." The press conference was unannounced. No invitations. No schedule. Just a camera crew and a live feed, hijacked straight into every major network. Pritzker stood alone on the steps of the state capitol. No podium. No bulletproof glass. Just the truth. "I won't apologize," he began. "Not for protecting my colleagues. Not for standing up to tyranny. And not for saying, out loud, that democracy is worth fighting for." His voice was hoarse but unwavering. "Let me explain something to those who would rather redraw maps than win votes. This is not about Texas. It's not even about Illinois. It's about whether we're going to let the Constitution become a suggestion." He paused. Representative Tovar made his choice. I won't question his reasons. But I will say this, to the rest of those brave lawmakers who are still here, still standing, you are not fugitives. You are not cowards. You are patriots. And then, unexpectedly, he took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. This is not over. But it was unraveling. Because while the governor made his stand in front of the cameras, the final chess piece was already moving behind the curtain. Flight 828 from Austin touched down at Midway just before midnight. No announcement. No press. But the passenger was escorted straight to an unmarked black car waiting on the tarmac. Inside the car sat a man whose name no one dared say aloud. He wasn't an elected official. He wasn't even a known donor. But in the world of backroom deals and dark money, he was royalty. His presence in Chicago meant one thing. It was time to end this. No more games. No more theater. The fixer had arrived. Denise picked up the call on the second ring. "Don't hang up," the voice said. "Just listen." She froze. "We can bury this. Make it go away." Pritzker steps down quietly. Sights burnout. Family. Dignity intact. In exchange, no investigations. No ethics charges. No leaks. She didn't speak. "We both know what's coming." Tovar was the first. 2 more are ready to flip. If they do, the vote passes. The narrative flips. Pritzker becomes the villain. A long silence. "Tick-tock, Ms. Watkins." The line went dead. She stared at the phone like it had bitten her. When she finally told Pritzker, his reaction surprised her. He laughed. Not loudly. Just a dry, exhausted chuckle. "They want me to resign." "Not just resign," she said. "Disappear. Vanish from the story before it burns them, too." He stood and walked to the window. Let it burn. And then, it happened. In a stunning turn of events, 2 more Texas Democrats returned to Austin the next morning. The House reconvened. The maps passed. In less than 15 minutes, entire districts, ones that had taken decades to build, were erased. The headlines were immediate. Texas Republicans succeed in mid-decade redistricting coup. Voting Rights Act undermined as minority districts eliminated. Governor Pritzker under fire as Democrats collapse. Cameras turned away. The story was over. At least, that's what they thought. 3 days later, in a small church basement on Chicago's South Side, the Texas Democrats who remained gathered one last time. Not all had stayed. Not all agreed. But the ones who had, the ones who'd endured, were there. Pritzker entered without fanfare. No cameras. No press. He stood before them, not as a governor, but as a man who had gambled everything and lost. I can't promise we'll win this fight tomorrow, he said. Or next year. Maybe not even in my lifetime. He looked each of them in the eye. But I'll be damned if I let them write the last chapter. A murmur of agreement. A flicker of something not quite hope, but not despair either. Resolve. And that's when Denise handed him a folder. What's this? He asked. She smiled, barely. Something they didn't expect. Inside was evidence. Names. Wire transfers. A timeline of private meetings in Austin that tied the gerrymandering effort not just to Trump, but to international firms with deep-pocket lobbying power. The kind of story too big to bury. The kind of story that doesn't go away. The kind of story that gets someone killed, or elected president. Pritzker looked up, eyes narrowing. You ready to burn the house down? She asked. He nodded. Let's light the match. And to the audience watching at home, the ones who stayed through the chaos, the betrayals, the breaking news cycles, you should know something. They tried to bury this story. But some stories don't stay buried. And when the smoke clears, the real war begins. Because the line in the sand has been drawn. And it's not going anywhere. Subscribe now to Prime Day Vibe, because the next scandal won't wait for permission. It's already knocking. This is just the thunder.